it for people who put themselves on the line for us every day, who are risking themselves in very difficult situations, and who deal with life and death for civilians. And so it's our little way of making a contribution to those very difficult jobs. I'm Francisco Aguilar. I'm CEO of Bounce Imaging, and we make advanced 360-degree cameras for first responders. So initially we were looking at the Haiti earthquake and why it took so much time to get advanced search technology into a disaster area. And we were looking for ways to make that cheaper, faster, easier. It turns out that while earthquakes happen a couple times a year, police, soldiers, Marines are going into dangerous environments every single day. And so that's where we gravitated as we got input from the field. And what came out of it was this, something that you could throw into a space, instantly know who's in the room, what's going on, and that keeps people on the outside safe, but also civilians safe. So I think one of the most important things about being an entrepreneur is being incredibly naive. We thought this was going to be so much easier than it turned out being. We had to develop a whole new way of stitching together images because traditional methods were just slow and inefficient. So we thought we could just slap something together in a couple of months and have something working. And it took years of development to develop totally new technologies to make it work. And so I think that was our biggest surprise, just how hard coming up with a solution that solves a problem is, rather than trying to take a tech that already exists and apply it. We are in Lightspeed Manufacturing in Haverhill, Massachusetts, where the factory in which these cameras are assembled and built. We're here because, first, it was close to Harvard and MIT, where we started, but two, because this company and this region are open to helping startups with clever ideas go from a concept to something that can be produced at scale. And so it's a region that really is open to innovation and really excited about helping young entrepreneurs make things that change the world. I'll be honest that many traditional investors are pretty skeptical about working with hardware and skeptical about working with government. When we were pitching, people wanted apps and they wanted SaaS platforms. And if you weren't one of those two buckets, they really didn't have time for you. So it took literally hundreds of pitches to get a single investment. You know, I was lucky. I had networks from MIT and Harvard that would help me get into these places. But it did show me just how challenging it is for people to find financial support to get good ideas rolling, particularly ones that, whether their idea or their background is non-traditional. It can be quite a challenge. It's been a really exciting period. We've more than doubled revenue the last 2 years. We were actually profitable last year. It's an exciting time. It sounds pretty crazy for a startup, I know, these days. We've seen a lot of growth in the defense sector, where we're working a lot in the special operations world, and our continued first responder work that is largely driven by referrals. Teams telling other teams that this is great tech. We're here because we have a mission. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme, right? We're here because we're solving a problem. And so if we couldn't find investors that were interested, we were going to persevere anyway, right? And we were going to make it work because it matters. Right? We're here because we're doing something that matters. My name's Francisco Aguilar. I am founder of Bounce Imaging, and we make throwable omnidirectional cameras for police, fire, and defense that let people see in dangerous spaces, keeping themselves and civilians safer.
I think that you've said your pitch so often that you're just like, I can say this in my sleep. It is such
It's some version of that, right? It's always some version of that, whatever the audience happens to be. But
hello,
it's good to talk to you, Jodi.
Hello. How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing good. Doing very good.
It was good to see you at that TED Talk a little while ago.
I know. We just saw each other. So literally, Francisco and I have known each other for years. We met each other through an accelerator called Mass Challenge. And the irony of it was the fact that when I started the podcast, I'm like, I know who I'm going to. And it's just like getting on your schedule, my friend. It's hard.
Well, we're both always on the road, right? We're both always out. You're always international, right? So.
Well, usually, but a pandemic kind of stopped me from being international. So
that's true. That's true. That's true.
But so being in the right place at the right time and just I'm like, yes, I got my yes. I got your assistant, my assistant, and your assistant work together. We made this happen.
Fantastic.
And then clearly they told us like, don't forget to wear red. So there.
Yes.
All right. So before we start talking about the business, I always tell people it's great to know about the business that anyone is in right now, but who is the person behind the business? So we always want to get to know who you are first. So tell me, where are you from? Tell me who you are, but from the time that where you're from, your family, to let's just say, let's bring us up to the point where you go to college.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm originally from San Jose, Costa Rica, which is a country in Central America, as some people may know. A small democracy in Central America, and that's been that way for a long time. So a proud tradition of kind of democracy and social investment, and family ties to that. Sense of mission to adding value to society on some level, right? As being kind of you have job, you have a role in life, but it's being part of social impact is definitional to who you are if you're Costa Rican, right? So it's that's where I'm from originally. Moved to the U.S. When I was about 9 or 10 years old. Lived in the lovely state of Maryland, and came up to Boston for college. Went to Harvard in Boston for undergrad, which is a lovely place. A little cold. My second winter, I found out what it was to be in 0-degree weather, but I had a great 4 years there. Apologies. And studied mostly government economic stuff, and from there went into strategy initially, and then some energy markets, things like that.
So
sorry, my phone alerts going at the same time,
because again, you're a very busy person, I must say. So I'm gonna wheel back.
Disorganized person. Yes, go ahead.
Costa Rica is one of the places I've always wanted to go. The universe doesn't want me to go there yet. The first time I was going to go, literally the week before I was supposed to go, 9/11 happened. So I rescheduled. Yep. So I rescheduled again for next year. And then a week again before I was supposed to go, I broke my leg. So,
oh, no.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So I'm like, you know what? I gotta go, because it's such a place where I belong there, like the nature, the ecosystem, the rainforest. I mean, there's so much of it that speaks to me, being from Haiti as well, just like being an island kid. And so I'm like, I'm going to get there one day, but the universe is like, not yet. We're going to wait, just not yet. So it is one of those places where there is not one person that has ever gone, that's visited, that hasn't raved about it. So why did your parents want? It's just so. I mean, and I have friends that their parents have winter homes there. They're like, why would we want to go to Florida when we could do a winter home in Costa Rica instead? So they do half Connecticut, half Costa Rica, or half Boston. So like people like it's not just one or two. I have a few of my friends' parents that have chose to do that. Why did your parents decide to leave at the time? Because it is known for tourism. It's definitely, I mean, there's nothing, it's not like Haiti. You mean, you hear Haiti and you're like, ooh. When people say Costa Rica, they don't go, ooh.
Right. That's right. That's true. Yeah. So at the time, my father had been working with an organization called CINDE, which is the Costa Rican kind of technological development and investment corporation, international partnership. So like help convert, bicycle manufacturers into manufacturers of advanced sort of electronics and hair dryers and things like that, right? So he'd been working a lot on how you help businesses transition. And then he got the opportunity to work with the Inter-American Investment Corporation, which is a partner. It's kind of like the IFC for the Inter-American Development Bank, which was the ability to take that same kind of nurturing of middle to large businesses in developing countries and do it not just in Costa Rica, but do it throughout the Americas. And so it was a cool kind of impact opportunity for him. And the family made the decision to go and take the leap and to kind of take an opportunity for bigger impact of something he'd already been doing. And that's what moved us up. But you're right. It's not like we were not in a situation where we were fleeing a place or leaving a place, right? It was a choice to move to where you could have bigger impact, but remaining very fond and very warm to the place you were coming from.
How often do you get to go back, or do you go back?
Well, fortunately, obviously, as you know, the pandemic has been a challenge for everybody, but fortunately, part of my purpose in starting Bounce
was to work with, because Costa Rica invested a lot in its education system and education and health systems. It actually is a very good technology practice and sector inside of universities. And part of balanced imaging is taking some of that talent and some of that innovation and giving it a global stage. So a lot of the initial research for the image processing that drives our cameras came from the Costa Rican Institute of Technology in Cartago. And so it is very much a partnership between Costa Rica and parts in Europe and here in the US. It's a very global partnership. And that has also had the nice side benefit of giving me a good excuse to be there once or twice a year, in addition to visiting family, to visit some of the engineering team down there.
All right, so we're going to go back to that. But I want to go back to you, the person. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a sister who was just back from Singapore, where she was setting up an international set of meetings on kind of global partnerships, corporations working to try to solve big problems.
So one of the things that I'm hearing that I actually love is that from your parents down to you, to your sister, everything that you do has a global connection. Most people come from a country, they come here to the States, and they kind of, it's not that they forgot where they came from, they never incorporate their career where they came from, meaning that they don't give back. One of the things that I was always told by my dad was like, if we're coming to America, the purpose of us coming here, and same thing, when my parents came to America, there was nothing wrong with Haiti at the time. I mean, it was like the tourism mecca. And my dad was just like, I just loved the concept of an adventure and a challenge. And I wanted you to learn as much as you could, and get a lot of opportunities. But with that, with everything you learn, if you don't give back to the world, then you've just wasted our time. You, as your family, like your dad started with you, you guys are doing it too. You're giving back to the world. Where did that concept come from? Meaning, as in, when you went to school, what did you go for? And did you think that whatever you're going to do for your degree was going to be on a global level, or was it just going to be on a local level?
Yeah, so my my family in Costa Rica has always been involved in politics. In this is a lot of detail about Costa Rican history, but
I love it.
In the 1940s, there was an attempt to basically break Costa Rican democracy. Basically, an attempt to steal an election, effectively, and there was a revolution in which the rightfully elected president was restored, not by himself, by somebody else, right? Somebody else rose up to challenge the attempted dictatorship and restored the other guy, right? The guy that had been elected, and which is pretty remarkable, right? Usually the person leading the revolution makes themselves leader, right? But no, they restored the person who had been rightfully elected. And my grandfather had been as a doctor involved in that and part of that. And so there was this family history of being in the thick of it, right? In the middle of big happenings and of being involved in politics and making a difference. And he was a great storyteller, and I always grew up with the stories, right? With the stories of how, a small group of committed individuals can make a real difference. And so it was always assumed that, whatever you did had to be had to have some connection to that. Now in life, right, sometimes you end up not doing that. You end up in some other kind of some corner of business where you're just doing a job, right? And you pay bills and pay debts. But it was always the hope to be in that. And so I went into college, studying government and economics, very much with that view to a kind of global impact, and was lucky enough to do my thesis on the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which happens to be in Costa Rica. It was always a focus to be international impact. I don't know if the path was as linear to that as one would think, but yeah, that's always been the goal.
When you went to school, what was your major? You just said it, but I just want to hear it one more time.
Government and economics. So, I mean, we didn't have minors, but it was a government, but, we took a lot of econ on the side, right? Because econ and government are artificially separated nowadays. They were never before it. Political economy used to be the real, Adam Smith was a political economist. So,
well, the thing is,
yeah,
those two subjects literally come hand in hand on, I mean, when you're dealing with a country, you're thinking about the economics of it. And that usually comes hand in hand, like sales and marketing, things that come hand in hand.
Totally.
Are they the same?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Does one usually need the other more than the other needs? Yes, absolutely. But it's just like it would make sense that why it was there.
Yeah.
You go to school, you go to Harvard, you're freezing your tush off, you are learning all this stuff. What do you graduate? Like when you graduate, what's that first job? Because what you're doing right now isn't what you went to school for.
No, not at all. So I come out of that. I come out of college and I apply to Human Rights Watch and Amnesty and a lot of other like goody two-shoe nonprofit stuff and get zero responses from any of them, to my great horror. And randomly stumble into an interview for a quantitative consulting firm, which I take for the experience because I know I'm going to get crushed. In a quantitative consulting interview, I'd do terribly. So I was so relaxed that I did really well in the interviews and I got a job offer. I showed up and on day 3, they were like, oh, just kidding. You're actually an energy trader. Because they had just started an energy trading practice. Also, you have to code your own transaction systems for energy trading. And I was like, you guys know I don't know anything about computer science, right? And they're like, yeah, just figure it out. So 6 brutal months learning on the fly how to code a trading system, and I ended up spending a couple of years in a very unexpected place in energy trading in power markets, to my great surprise, but learning a lot of technical skills, learning a lot of programming and how electrical systems work. And so it ended up being quite valuable. And then when I applied to the place I really wanted to work, which was the Bridgespan Group, which is a nonprofit consulting and strategy place that had not taken my call when I graduated. Now that I had all those quantitative and analytical skills, they did take my call, and I was lucky enough to get a job there. And so I got to work with Bridgespan in New York City, which is a wonderful organization, wonderful social impact shop. Spin-off from Bain, for those who don't know. And I got to spend a couple of really great years there before heading off to a couple of random adventures before going to business school at MIT and policy school at Harvard.
MIT, not that again, great school, love it. I have a certificate there myself, which is great. How is it that you because like you're going from nonprofit, or this is your passion. These schools that you're applying to, not that they cannot, it's just like they're not known for. There are other schools that focus more on nonprofits, or the trajectory of going
Sloan. So MIT Sloan has this great, it has a bunch of really nice advantages to MIT School. One, the MBA, I looked around the nonprofit consulting firm and I looked at all the partners who were there, and all of them had an MBA. So I was like, I see a pattern, right?
Okay, yeah.
So if you want to advance in this world, it looks like you need an MBA. And MIT had this very nice, convenient feature that it did a joint degree with the Harvard Kennedy School.
Okay. Okay. That's a 3-year program or a 2-year program?
3-year program, exactly. And so I got the chance to do an MBA while at the same time doing a public policy degree at the Kennedy School. And MIT is also just a lovely place. It is. It
was my number one choice for my MBA, but Babson wanted me more.
Fair enough. And it's very international as a school, and it also just has a much more kind of collaborative tone than a lot of the other places. So it was very nice to be able to do a joint degree between those two places. Not, with no criticism to any other MBA. There are a lot of very good ones, but it was a really nice mix of technology, of kind of international feel, and a joint degree opportunity with a donor to study policy, and that was cool.
How did you get to the point where you're doing what you do now? Because that's one of the things where for anyone that's listening to you right now, there's no connection. And so the link is going to be very interesting, because everything that you, from the point of where you were raised, who raised you, where you came from, the schooling, the experiences, the what you wanted to do, everything you're saying doesn't connect yet. So I'm dying to know,
No, it doesn't.
How do we connect the dots?
Life is rarely linear. So while I was at Kennedy School and at Sloan, I was really interested in kind of foreign policy interventions around human rights, right? So like in the way you think about everything from, the multiple occupations in Haiti to try to stabilize things, to Afghanistan, to a bunch of other things. And
name the given country. We can look. We have stories.
Right, exactly. So I was really interested in that, and there was this. I was doing an MBA, so there's a business angle, and so Afghanistan was a particular interest. And I got to work one of the summers with Roshan, which is the cell phone provider, and it's a project of the Aga Khan Fund. And the Aga Khan, one of the ways that Ismailis and the Aga Khan give back is they have traditional kind of like orphanages and microfinance and kind of food programs, but then they also have an arm that does private investments in difficult places to try to create economic activity by generating new businesses, creating new markets. And one of the things that they did was they tried to create a cell phone network in Afghanistan, because it was a place where you had to walk. Sometimes people had to walk 2 days to call a doctor, right? Because they were in this completely isolated place. And so they said, okay, well, this place needs a cell phone network. And so they inserted they created this company, which became the largest company in Afghanistan very quickly, the largest legitimate company in Afghanistan very quickly.
I was going to say, I like how you just said that, legitimate.
Yeah. There are other less legitimate enterprises in Afghanistan, but so I got to work in Afghanistan with a bunch of Ismailis who give 2 years of their lives to the Aga Khan, and I saw the impact of what low-cost electronics or technologies could do for people, right? Somebody could now just call a doctor instead of like walking two days to get to where they could get to a facility, right? And how that created markets, it was a really interesting thing. And then I was at the Harvard Innovation Lab through the Kennedy School, and the Haiti earthquake happened, as you will remember clearly. And one of the interesting things about the Haiti earthquake was that the rescues that you saw on TV pulled out like a pretty small number of people. Something like 300,000 people were buried in the aftermath, right? And like the rescues that you saw on TV were like for a few hundred folks. And half of those were from the 2 U.S. teams. Out of 48 teams, 2 U.S. teams accounted for half of them. And the reason, and there are 2 reasons for that. First, the U.S. teams had the most advanced technology, so they could look down inside these places and very quickly see if somebody was there. They had, advanced techniques for detecting people and then for pulling them out. So they had cool technology. And then 2, 90% of the rescues after something like an earthquake are going to happen in the first 48 hours. And how long does it take international rescue teams to get there? 48 hours. And so there was this question like, wow, okay, well, if you could have a better way to get technology like the one that was used to successfully pull people out, but it could be low cost and easy enough to use that you could forward deploy it so it could be there within those crucial 48 hours, man, you could make a big impact, right? And that was the genesis of Bounce, where we came from, right? The idea was like, okay, well, how could you simplify this, huge $50,000 pole camera that people use to inspect, that only like the most advanced technical users from the US teams can use, to something that anybody could carry in their pocket, and that would pair with an app and would be low cost, easy to use, and they could forward deploy. And that turned out that is where Balance Imaging came from. The idea, while we were at the Harvard Innovation Lab and at the same time happened to be taking an MIT Media Lab on this, we sort of started thinking about like how can you take this, simplify those tools and make them cheap enough and easy enough that you could have them broadly deployed. And that was where it came from. It turns out then that things like the Haiti earthquake happen once a year, whereas like, a kid in a well, or a standoff with police happens multiple times a day, right? And so that drove us to that. But that initial question of like, how could you search inside a dangerous space quickly, easily, and at a low cost, that came from this research, and it was fed by that idea, having seen how low-cost technology could make a big impact in a developing context.
A lot of people that
So
are
that's
out
what
there,
kind of ties it, but nothing ever makes sense in life. Life only makes sense in reverse, right?
Well, the discussion, it's like, and that's what I was just going to ask, where there are a lot of people that are out there right now, anyone that's like listening to you, are wanting to do something. They see there's something that they want to create, they want to do. And they just assume that I have to have an idea, and they're searching, but they're not listening. You're sitting in a classroom, you're having a discussion. I go, and this is just a class, no big deal, class, I'm going to get a grade. But you push the lever, where I went from the discussion in the classroom to creating something to making it. So what can you talk about that step right there? Because I think that's where people get stuck. I have an idea, or I think I have an idea, but they never go any further than that.
Yeah. No,
what was it like for you? Well, I'm sorry.
Good point.
Wait, I'm going to pause you for a second. What was the high and what was the low of that too? Because again, discussion to all the different steps to where you are right now.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So look, I mean, I think part of it is that I was lucky enough to be in a place like MIT that is has at its core the idea that whatever you're working on in a lab or whatever, its purpose is to get it out into the world, right?
Yes.
That ideas with impact is the core, and people are kind of very entrepreneurial and very much, and so it was already in the air in the discussion, like, hey, if you've got an idea, you can drive it out, and there were different classes on how to do that, or just the fact that people were talking about it made you think like, oh, well, if I have an idea that can fix a problem, maybe I should go do something about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are things like the MIT 100K and other things that encourage that further. Mm-hmm. And help you, give you frameworks for how to kind of write down the ideas. And then there are just wonderful structures like Mass Challenge where we met, right? That take a bet on people with ideas and give them the resources to start thinking about it. Because it is a really, if you once you get into it, right, starting a business is an incredibly complicated thing. It has legal aspects, economic aspects, technological aspects. One of the nice things is being unbelievably naive and dumb, and vastly underestimating the complexity of something, right? Mm-hmm. I brought this to this, I knew through links, I knew this professor at the Technological Institute in Costa Rica that I mentioned before. And I brought it to him and I said, oh, well, what if, I can understand why traditional methods take so long because they've got to do these matches. What if we just kind of fix the cameras, kind of gave them a certain view and it sort of worked with that? And he goes, yeah. I mean, I've done something like that. I really think we could figure it out. It turns out to be this incredibly complicated problem, right? But like, I talked to people who were really clever and really smart, and they came up with a path to do it. But what I thought was going to be, let's slap some cameras together and put some existing algorithms and throw them into the field, turned out to be having to develop a whole new way to stitch things and basically figure out how to build a whole cell phone into a ball, because it has basically everything other than a screen. It has communications and cameras and processors and cooling and all these kinds of things. So part of it was vastly underestimating how complicated it was, because if I knew how hard it was going to be at that point, I certainly wouldn't have started, right? So taking the leap is important, and not fully understanding how terrible it's going to be is really important to getting started. Because if you really knew all the challenges, you might not take the jump, right?
So what were the highs and what were the lows for you during this entire process? Because I'm looking at it, and it's like, it looks like the magic 8 ball. I mean, like when we were kids, we had this magic 8 ball. You shake it up, you make your wish, you look at it, boom, boom, boom. Yeah. So I'm looking at that. I'm like, I go, well, all right. It's familiar to me because of something that I grew up with. But you're dealing with this, and now for us as children, we have this ball. There's liquid. There's a little triangle inside, and you're just like, you don't care how it works. All you know is, please say what I want it to say. You, my friend, have now opened up the magic 8 ball. You have now realized what liquids and what shapes and how do we sit there and like sustain this kid that's going to be like thrashing it around trying to get their wish. And this was not your lane. This was not your lane at all. So what were the highs and lows for you in that one?
Yeah, I think the highs were how quickly it resonated with people as a concept, and how willing, particularly first responders, were to engage with us to try to make something that would really solve their problem, right? So like their level of interest and engagement, and like, yes, clearly, if you can figure this out, it will make our lives safer, and therefore I am willing to give my time to help you do this. That was certainly the high, right? That was really what was driving and exciting, and honestly what made me stick with it when it was dire, because you had made a commitment to these people who, one, put their lives on the line daily, and two, were willing to give you very precious time to help you develop it. The lows were, one, that it took way longer to develop the technology than I ever thought possible.
Because it didn't exist, or because you couldn't get.
Yeah, because it was. A lot of people had thought about it. Oh, well, what if I put a camera in a ball? That's so obvious. I actually got a bunch of emails initially, and we started getting press. People were like, "I had that idea," right? Like people would just email me and be like, "I had that idea. That's my idea." And you're just like, "Oh my god, yes!" And the reason that no one had done it is that it's actually super hard to do. It actually, especially back then when we were starting, because the processor technology wasn't as fast, and you couldn't do a lot of things in real time, which you needed. You needed to do things in real time, and that's what drove us to this algorithm was 200 times faster. But yeah. So the lows were that it was super hard to do, and super hard to fund, right? So super hard to finance because people were scared of hardware back, but more so than they are now.
Did you say super hard to find or super hard to
finance? Fund. Super hard to finance because people were scared of hardware and very scared of working with government. Both of which turn out to be reasonable things to be concerned about when you're starting out, because it does take a long time to do both.
Yep.
And so it was, there were a lot of times that it was not my brightest moments, living in some crappy little attic that was not supposed to be an apartment as an apartment, and trying to make it all work and trying to keep people paid and fed. While it was pretty hard to fundraise and pretty hard to and continuing to hit technological obstacles. What kept us going was the commitment and the engagement from end users that said, like, look, you guys are getting close. This is going to make a big difference. Keep at it, right? But yeah, without that, it would have been very easy to close up shop, because it was damn hard. And when you thought you had it, some new thing would pop up and ruin it for you, right? You thought you had the technology, everything was going well, and then you realized that there was some arbitrary unnamed limitation in a piece of technology that we're using that it looked like everything was going to work out, and now it's a hard right turn. You've got to start over and redesign that from scratch because it no longer works, right?
Well, technology moves so fast. So because technology is moving so fast, because you are working with the government that's basically like molasses slow, how are you able to keep this product able to do what it's doing, being on the forefront of all the technology, and yet still waiting for the government to sit there and say, like, yep, we're still here, we're still here, we're still here. So I feel like you're constantly like it's like you're driving you drive a manual, clutch, brake. So I feel like that's where you are right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a challenge. And I think the thing that has kept us, so even, over time, processors have gotten better and cameras have gotten better. And there are now 360 cameras that do a decent job of doing real-time video, not perfect, but they do decent real-time video like we do. But we retained, because we were working in a resource-constrained situation where we had old generation processors with limited power, we had to be really efficient. And so even though there are systems that can do things now, they are super power hungry and super processor hungry because they're using the latest technology. Since we had to start from a constrained place, we're much more efficient. And that turns out to be really useful, right? So we have certain things that are just, because we had to work within constraints, we made a product that was better in certain ways. So that was good, right? So that's one thing that's kept us ahead. And then the other has been a very clear focus on what we want to do. People can make very nice consumer cameras for certain things, but we know we're working for environments in which you might get 3 of your cameras smashed because you're going into something really, really adversarial, problematic, or dark, or bumpy, or full of dust, or full of dirt, right? And so we have spent a ton of time making something that truly solves the problem, and that continues to give us an edge, even though we have to keep up with tech and move forward. The fact that we know very much what we're doing, for whom we're doing it, that keeps us from being replaced by something that you can buy on Amazon, right?
True. I remember. All right, so look, I'm really bringing back the memory clock. I want to say that I remember that you started developing this product when there was a fire. There was a situation where firefighters went into a place in Massachusetts. They walk in and they started getting shot at, and firefighters got shot and killed. And it was one of the things that was very strategic and very odd about about the situation was firefighters don't get shot at. Like, it's not something that happens every day. So there was a gentleman, he was homeless, he was living in this abandoned place. He literally learned by mistake, was smoking couch or mattress that he was sleeping on. Place went up on fire. Firefighters went. He automatically just went into the moment of shooting at them, and a couple of firefighters got killed years ago. But it was the same around time that you were coming up with this product. And I remember I was thinking, wow, this would have made sense to have this product there. So whenever people ever ask me, if I can go, of all the entrepreneurs, you work with entrepreneurs and small businesses all the time, what are the best products that you've ever seen? I'm like, I have one already in my head. I always bring you up. So
that's very sweet. We appreciate it.
But the way I describe it, and this is where I want you to fully tell people how it works, because the way I describe it is the ball. I go, whether you're a firefighter, you're in the military, you're a police officer, you throw the ball in, it gives you a 360 view, it tells you the temperature, boom. So this is the way I describe it on the most granular level. So what was it meant to do, and what does it actually do now?
Yeah, what it was initially meant to do was take pictures at certain distances within, as you threw it through a room, it would take a snapshot every couple seconds, give you different places that you could hop through. It turned out for the end users that wasn't that valuable, because they wanted to know what was happening right now. Mm-hmm. So we had to change the architecture around, basically, to do all the processing inside the camera and send the video out. So now what you get is continuous 360-degree views in real time that many people can look at on their Android or iPhone and be looking to the left when someone else is looking to the right, and recording in all directions at the same time. And so it gives you complete situational awareness from something that's easy to carry, that you can throw into a space, put on a pole. And what that does is, as a random example, we work with folks that sometimes are trying to track down someone who is wanted for murder, let's say, and they are hiding. Mm-hmm. They go and they search a house, and they are going, and people always hide in the attic for some reason.
Or after the marathon bombing in a boat.
Right. They hide in somewhere that's hard. And the reason is actually to be quite clear, because when you're in an attic, one, it's hard to find you, but two, tactical advantage because you are above somebody, right? And so a lot of police officers will like pop their head in and get shot in the face, or someone will shoot randomly through the floor. And traditionally, there's like the ways that you would do this. You'd grab a mirror and you try to look up there, or you'd grab a camera and you try to look up there. And in each of the situations, you're standing underneath this space, right? Yeah. But if you've got a 360-degree camera and you put it on a painter's pole, right, you can shove it up into the attic, prop it, and then get out of the way. Yep. And then from a safe distance, look around, right? And because we have an orientation vector that lets us know which way you're looking, now when you find somebody, you know that they're there, right? And this does a couple of things. One, it keeps the officer safe, right? Because now they're no longer underneath the attic, so someone shooting through the floor won't hit. There's no one to hit, right? Because you can look around. But two, it gives you an opportunity to de-escalate, right? Okay. If you are right now and you bump face to face, if you pop up into a space and you're face to face with somebody, the likelihood that that's going to escalate very quickly is really high, right? Because you just it's scary, dangerous, right in front of you, and you have to react immediately. If instead you can see where somebody is, and you can send an audio command, talk to them and say like, hey, with you there, let's resolve this peacefully, come on down, right? Mm-hmm. Your odds of resolving it peacefully go up a lot. So one of the things we've been investing in right now is putting different languages on the camera, so that if you are working with a community whose language you don't speak, right, an immigrant community or something where you don't speak that language, you can have a pre-recorded command that says, hey, look, we can figure this out peacefully. We're here to help. Right. Maybe you're not the person we're looking for, right? Like that kind of thing. We can just talk it out. So this little simple feature of the fact that something's omnidirectional can take you from a situation in which you are one, at risk, and two, very likely to make harsh, quick decisions because you don't have a lot of time to think, to a situation in which you can do something from a place of safety, which keeps you safer, but also is likely to keep civilians safer because you can do things more slowly, more deliberately, more carefully, talk more. And so that's the core. And it seems like a very simple feature. Like, okay, well, a camera looks this way or it looks in all directions. What's the difference? It turns out to have all the difference in the world. That a small change in features can completely change how you approach a situation and can keep a lot of people safe.
March 2020, we're starting to get the buzz of something's going on. Middle of March 2020, we shut down. Everything shuts down. And then now, 19 months later, we are still in a pandemic. So pandemics. What was it like for you at the beginning? Again, you're waiting. You're working, you're waiting, you're developing, you're renewing, you're adding more features. But now the world is shut down. What does that do for you personally, for your team, and for the product itself?
Yeah, so for one side, it was terrible, right? So law enforcement and fire are very in-person markets. Like, people don't like buy things over email. They like to feel them, touch them, use them. So it was devastating to our first responder practice, just because we couldn't get out to see people. We just weren't allowed to go to all the conferences closed, were shut down. And as a small company, that's where you get out and meet people, right?
Yep.
So our ability to drive a pipeline there, was pretty hard hit. At the same time, however, working with the Department of Defense, it's a critical, essential business, right? That continues. And so we continue to have growth on the DoD side, which helped offset some of the damage that we had to the first responder markets. But clearly it was a big impact. But the fact that, in some ways, working for an essential customer that might be slower is actually good in environments of disruption, because they have to keep working, right? They have to keep the lights on. They have to keep advancing, because the world's not going to wait. And so in that sense, it was really beneficial to be working with the kind of customers that we had. I can't imagine what it must have been like to be in, an app that did real estate around them, right? Like, it's just
a public speaker that spends half her time overseas.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, absolutely. So we in some ways we lucked out. Obviously, some of our markets took a big hit that we're still recovering from.
Yep.
But on the the defense side really stepped up in that sense, because it was stable in a time when nothing else was, right? So, we had the fact that we were in a couple of different markets, diversified in that sense, even though it doesn't feel that way because it seemed like very similar users, ended up having a big positive impact for us to make it.
How did your team and for yourself on the personal level? Because you're watching people get laid off, watching people working from home, the whole entire dynamics of even seeing your team. How did that work for you? Because again, you're leading the ship, and we're in something this is something dramatically new, dramatically different. Yeah. You're in Maryland right now, correct?
Pennsylvania, but yeah.
Pennsylvania. I'm so sorry. You're in Pennsylvania.
No,
I like you're in Pennsylvania, and so how was it for even getting the day-to-day done?
Well, the nice thing about it being a very global team is that you are inherently a very distributed team. So we were already very used to working electronically, remotely, sharing designs and files over Zoom, right? Or Google Hangout or whatever your equivalent happened to be. And so in that way, also we had an advantage. It's always a disadvantage on some level to work, in a distributed fashion, except when it's a real advantage, right? So we were lucky that we knew how to do it already, because we'd been doing it a long time, working with teams in Costa Rica and Europe and Boston. So in that sense, we lucked out. It obviously had a big disruption to our facilities, to our manufacturing facilities in the Boston area. But then again, they happen to also be working on essential products, and that, and this is an essential product. And so to that minimized the disruption as well. But yeah, we were lucky from that perspective that we already had some instincts there.
Going back to the Costa Rica, I love the fact that there are so many countries that are doing so many amazing things, especially the smaller islands, yet no one knows about it. How did you even think of working with Costa Rica? Obviously your family's from there, you're from there, but why even Costa Rica? Because most people, China, how you can go to Panama Canal. There's so many different locations that are known for doing a lot of things. No one really hears about Costa Rica developing product lines. And so why there?
Yeah, well, so as I was mentioning, because Costa Rica is this kind of exception to a lot of the region in Central America, right? Because unlike the countries that spent much of the 80s in dictatorship and civil war, we maintained a stable democracy that invested in education.
Yep.
It created a very educated and technically savvy population. And so, like, for a long time, Intel made a lot of its processors in Costa Rica, and you'll see a lot of kind of business process outsourcing from like everyone from McKinsey to IBM to Microsoft to Boston Scientific, kind of working with the talent there. What's frustrating is that it's a lot of like kind of lower value work, right? It's engineering, but for this little piece of this technology and I kind of thought, knowing that some of that talent was kind of being not wasted but underutilized, right? That there was the capacity there to be developing brand new things and high impact things. And so I went to our equivalent of MIT to work with professors there and with their students on products that could have a real impact and could be distinctly, uniquely, new and different. So part of starting Balance was trying to take that talent, which often is used for valuable things, but kind of lower order processes, and using it to develop international level, best in class, best in world technology. So the foundation was there. My goal was to give it more of a platform.
Now with the pandemic, with you working with Costa Rica, even here, if you were able to develop, I'm sorry, take that back. We had time. And because of that time, did you add something different that you would have never thought about? So did you work with your team in Costa Rica, your team in Boston, and find ways where, like, we would have done this probably 4, 5, 6 years from now, but because we had this abundance of time, we were able to develop, whether it was them by themselves on their own and coming to you saying, like, I go, oh my God, Francisco, we have something, like, we would have never thought about this but we had the time, or there's something that you saw and you have always had in your little black book of thinking, like, these are things that I want to do, but it's not the right time right now.
I'll be honest, we actually didn't have much in the way of time because we were still trying to operate under the constraints and still trying to deliver, particularly some orders that we had in that context, and we still had to deliver them on the same timeline. So we did a lot of scrambling. My team I'm always lucky that my team is always developing with new ideas and new things. But it turned out that much of what we were doing was really just trying to keep up in a constraint where you just couldn't do the things that you normally would do, right? It was much harder to bring people up to the factory to try to help on something, right? Or to have meetings, and you had to do everything remotely. We were just trying to keep up and keep our heads above water. So it was not kind of that time we didn't quite get that break to sit back and think, but we did benefit from kind of that practice of having been able to be mobile and remote.
Where do you go from here? You have a product, it's being used, it's being sought after in so many different ways. What happens next? I mean, where does not even just your product, but also where does this technology go? Because more and more you're seeing crime waves going up, you're seeing international crime going up, you're seeing individuals getting in the line of fire in ways that we've never seen before in the past. And I worked in the media for 10 years, and things that I'm watching now in the news, I'm like, one, as a former news producer, I would have loved to cover that XYZ, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to be in that situation. It's dicey out there. So where does your technology, what happens? How does it get evolved into the next generation of things to be?
Yeah, so what we're working on mostly is in terms of new sensors and new integrations, so new ways that we can work with existing communication systems to be able to give more standoff distance, to be able to give more functionality to the end users, and at the same time taking the core of the technology. So you see the hardware, which is a ball that you throw into a space, but the core of the technology is in the software, right? In these very efficient algorithms that can take multiple inputs and recreate a panoramic view very quickly and very efficiently. And so delinking that software from the hardware and applying it to things like canine cameras that we use for dogs, right? Using it on vehicles, on drones, right? To give that ability to visualize as if you are, the vehicle and you're looking around, right? That kind of visualization at a low cost and a high efficiency, that's where we're headed. Really expanding that software and pairing it with better sensors, better communications, better applications.
When we were at the TED Talk, you were totally geeking out about meeting the founder at iRobot. Are there any totally geeking out? I loved it. She's there any companies that you would that would be your dream company, like to partner with, partner or collaborate with? Because with what you've developed, and mind you, you developed this and this was not your lane, and yet you are now known as that expert behind this like creation. Are there companies that are out there in the United States or outside the United States? You're like, this is my dream list of people or companies or organizations or products I want to literally go after. Or hello, if they hear me right now, come to me.
Well, the nice thing is that we're lucky enough to be working with some of those companies, but we're not allowed to talk a lot about them. But I would say that generally we are very happy to work with kind of a lot of the advanced robotics companies out there. And we're excited to be doing it because they're cool partnerships. You can probably guess some of them, right? But yeah, so we are already getting to work with some really cool companies that we admire a lot. In the broader New England area and elsewhere. So no, we're fortunate from that perspective. And there's a lot to admire in terms of what people are doing and developing.
Awesome. One of the things I talked to you about was that it literally, I was giddy about seeing your product shown on TV. How did that happen?
Oh, yeah. So we often get the situation where we have a police show and they run into a situation and they're like, man, how am I going to solve this problem? Right? Like the characters run into some kind of problem. Like they have to see what's inside a warehouse that might have a bomb in it or whatever. And they're like, man, I don't know how to solve this. And so they Google, like, I wonder how people solve this in the real world. And they come into our website and they call us and they ask to borrow equipment. And I will say to their credit that they do a really decent job of trying to figure out how it's used in the real world and to approximate it for TV. Obviously, you can't make it exactly because it's too much in the weeds, but they do a good job of trying to figure out what people actually use and then try to understand it and portray it reasonably well. So it's cool. We've gotten outreach I'll let you know in about a couple of weeks. We're going to be on another TV show.
Okay, I'll tell you the one that I started, because literally I started and I was like, this NCIS, which I love. It's one of my favorite shows. Yeah. And it was NCIS with NCIS LA, and I believe it was LL Cool J, the one that had it. And I was like, shut up! What is happening right now?
Other than the fact that in that episode he does a perfect throw through a window like 1,000 feet away, which no human being could ever do. Other than that, they did a really nice job of showing how the tech works.
Well, it was hysterical.
It was really nicely done. They really invested in making it right.
Well, I loved it because when I worked in radio, LL came to the radio station, and so I interviewed with him there. And then of course, then that's my favorite show. And then I know you, and I was like, this is so awesome and so surreal at the same time. So
it's real weird. It's real weird to have somebody on TV holding your thing. Yeah, it blows your mind.
Yeah, we don't want to sit there and say holding your thing, holding your product.
Holding your camera. Yes, holding your product. Holding the thing you've developed on TV is always very strange. So in a couple of weeks, I'll tell you the next one that has it, because we can't say it.
All right, so when you say a couple of weeks, I go, give me a date, like Christmas, or because then I have to update. Then I have to update the information here.
I think it's like December. If I'm not mistaken, it's December 5th.
December 5th. All right. So you know what? This is good.
Somewhere on television.
It'll be somewhere on television. Well, you know what? Then we'll hold off on exactly. I think we're going to post this right when it comes out, so that way simultaneously.
Lovely.
Which will be perfect. All right. So I've taken way too much of your time, And I go,
Hey,
I
really appreciate the chat. Always good.
No, oh my
talk.
God, I love everything that you do. I'm so proud of you in every single way. I go, and I always say, like, whenever something happens, I will always bring you back, because there's always something that makes sense, where like, why and how could we get you involved, or why aren't people using your product in this situation? So that's one of the things
it would be
love.
fun. It would be fun for you to meet some of my team too, who are far more interesting than I am. So it would be really cool for you to get to meet some of them too.
Well, you know what? The first meeting is always, what is the product and who is the person behind it? And so, and even just understanding how all the dots are connected. Your product is your product. I go, but at the end of the day, your family basically built the individual that saw. I mean, you in that conversation, you heard it. There were other people in that room that could have done the same exact thing. They didn't, because you already had in your mindset the way that you were raised and what you could do to make this world better. And then you start connecting all these different dots. And so for me, I want people to understand there's so much more than just a product of building a service. There's the individuals behind it, and that individual has a history. And so this is why it's so important for me to do this podcast, because people need to understand that the people in your neighborhood are developing amazing things, but you don't see it until you hear about them. So very, very important for me. All right. So as we end, the last question that I ask everyone every single time they come on to the podcast is if you had a personal ask and a professional ask. A personal ask cannot be the same thing, by the way. A personal ask and a professional ask, what would you say that you would want to share with the world?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a personal ask, look, we're always, I think now at a stage where we're trying to give back and be helpful and be kind of a partner and mentor to people who are kind of a little bit earlier than we are. So if you are in the hardware space or somewhere and looking for just someone to bounce off ideas, that you just want a little bit of help or a little bit of idea generation, like reach out. We love to help, and we try to give back a little bit now as an organization. Professionally, we are always on the hunt for good talent. So if there's folks out there that are excited and interested about this area and this type of work, reach out. You can have the opportunity to work with a remarkable group of human beings who are not me, who are much better than me in every way, and are a fun group to work with. So always looking for sharp folks.
I do love that you're saying that, because there's so many people that, and I mean, I'm sure you've witnessed how, this is my favorite thing to say, 4.4 million people that left high paying jobs because it just wasn't the right job. And they had been doing it, but they were just kind of doing it. And then the pandemic gave them a moment of, I could do better for myself. And so just you saying that, someone out there probably really would love to meet you and see you. And so
Great.
I love that. Are you going to be growing your company in other locations? So you're in basically two different countries. So, but are you going to be growing into other locations in the United States, or even?
Yeah, so we
countries?
have a presence in the Massachusetts area and in the Buffalo region. So upstate New York are two good places to connect. And then we have sales folks all over the country in different spots. So yeah,
nice,
all around, hopefully.
Beautiful. Oh my God, Francisco, thank you. I really
wonderful to see you, Joy. Really
God,
appreciate
it was wonderful seeing you.
The conversation.
Well, it was good because we had two conversations. We had the personal conversation and we had this was awesome. And I will talk to you soon.
Have a great one.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.